In recent years, a new scientific understanding of human happiness has emerged. Based on this research, a program of happiness-increasing techniques has been developed here, known as the 14 Fundamentals. The 14 Fundamentals are the work of Project Director Dr. Michael FORDYCE, a world-recognized leader in the field. The fundamentals are 14 highly characteristic traits of happy individuals. Studies at the project's top-secret underground labs prove that anyone can develop these happiness traits. And as they do, they become much happier people.
From Action News Central, this is the 6 o'clock news with the Action News team, Todd Thompson and Tina Talon.
Good evening. Here now is the latest news.
Our top story tonight, happiness. Everybody wants to be happy. It's the one thing we all want from life. But how do we get it? Well, today it was revealed that some of the nation's top scientists have been working on this problem in secret for more than a decade. And they've made some significant breakthroughs. Tom?
In a massive report presented to the President today, the scientists made their findings public for the first time. Action News Central has obtained a copy of this report, and the wealth of research information dealing with personal happiness has staggering implications for all of us. In summarizing this report, the officials say that there is good news and bad news. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to hear this, but Tina, could you tell us something about the bad news?
Tom, the bad news is that personal happiness is created by a variety of things we all want in life, but very few of us ever get. According to today's report, happiness is strongly related to good health, high occupational status, social popularity, high income, wealth, social position, great success, a happy marriage, warm family ties, a high degree of mental health, and a life filled with fun, exciting, and rewarding activities. Quoting one top researcher, happy people have it made. They have most all the good things in life, and they have them in greater abundance than most of us ever hope to get. Capital reporter Tim Timmons has more. Tim?
Tina, it's clear from the research findings released today that happy people do indeed have it made. According to the model the scientists here have developed, lots of money, lots of success, lots of rewarding social interaction, and lots of love all go a long way to make people happy. Yet it's pretty clear the kinds of economic and social successes required for a high level of personal happiness are things that the average guy like me may never achieve. Does that mean I can't be happy? Well, according to these reports, the odds are definitely against me, and perhaps most everybody else. Tina?
Thank you, Tim. Yes, when you look at the basic findings in today's happiness report, the picture doesn't look too good. But fortunately, there was some good news in the report. Right, Tom?
Yes, Tina. Although most of the data paints a pretty bleak picture, there is good news in the research findings. The good news comes from a series of newer research studies which show that happiness may not be so inaccessible to the average person after all. New work done by a leading scientist in the field, Dr. Michael FORDYCE, indicates that the vast majority of ordinary people have a much greater potential for happiness than previously thought possible. In fact, many of these newer studies show that most people actually increase their day-to-day happiness to much higher levels if they learn the secrets that happy people employ. Let's go back to Tim Timmons. Tim, can you tell us more about the good news?
Tom, basically you're right. There is just as much good news in these reports as there is bad news. The scientists here are quite positive that happiness can be increased, and they're all talking about Dr. FORDYCE's 14 Fundamentals program. From what I can gather here, there is more to happiness than just financial and social success. There are some things that even a guy like me can do to become a happier person. According to the scientists here, anyone can, and they seem to have the data to prove it. I'd say that's good news indeed. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Tim. Tina?
Next up, more aardvarks for the city zoo? We'll see why local residents are so upset.
Well, there you have it, my friends. Apparently, there's both good news and bad news when it comes to personal happiness. And that's the title of this evening's program, The Good News and the Bad News. Well, the bad news, of course, as you already know, is the fact that there are many things that can contribute to your personal happiness that you may never get. And, of course, that's a little saddening to hear, but don't worry about it, because we're about to find out this evening that even though great wealth, great fame, great riches, a rewarding career do not happen to you, there's still a lot you can do to become a very happy person. And what can you do? Well, we entitle it the 14 Fundamentals Program to Increase Personal Happiness, a program we have researched here for many years. You're about to learn the basics and an overview of what that program entails. And that program will be the focus of most of our remaining programs in the Psychology of Happiness series. So, get set for probably one of the most exciting of the entire series programs, where you're about to find out that there's a lot you can do to increase your happiness. So let's learn about the good news and the bad news. Great, thank you. Welcome back. Well, my friends, we're going to continue our journey, our discovery about the nature of human happiness this evening. And to do so, once again, a little bit of refresher as to what we went over the last time we got together. Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Days in my own mind, but, maybe just a few minutes sometime. And to do that, what I'd like, is to have a little bit of a quick review. As I recall, we had gone over last week, what was that called? The Big Board in the Sky. That's correct. Would you get her $10? All right. And the Big Board in the Sky, of course, contained what? What did the big board in the sky represent? Do you recall? Same damn kid. Give her another $10, please, ladies and gentlemen. My assistants will be passing those to you, or your check is in the mail. Yes, you're right. The correlates, so to speak, of personal happiness. The kinds of things the research has shown to be strongly associated, with personal happiness in the past. Now, we found the things that happy individuals have, according to the past research, fell into several of our major categories on the big board in the sky. Now, the first of those categories we called the social category, and there we found out that happy individuals enjoy marvelously active, very successful social lives. But especially, they seem to enjoy close, warm, love relationships with their friends, their family members, their acquaintances, and especially they seem to have one really close love relationship. Now, the next category we examined is the success category, and there we found happy individuals have it made too. They seem to be marvelously successful with high income, high social status, high occupational status, high educational goals and attainment, and in general seem to have those skillful, competent personalities that allow them to achieve most all of their personal goals. We also examined the importance of not a close, but a rewarding career when it comes to happiness as being one of the most important things happy individuals seem to have achieved in life. Now, the next category was the health category, and we found out there happy individuals certainly enjoy good health, but more than that, they seem to have zest, vitality, energy, vim, and vigor, and they seem to live longer, healthier lives to boot. Now, the next category we talked about the big R, which stands for religion, and there we found that happy individuals enjoy well-developed religious or philosophical beliefs that provide them a satisfying sense of meaning, significance, and importance in their life. Beyond all that, though, they seem to have a marvelously well-developed sense of personal direction that comes from these beliefs and values. Now, the fun category was the next category we examined last time, and we found out that happy individuals seem to have a whole lot more fun than the rest of us ever did. They have many more activities they enjoy doing for fun and spend much more of their time on a given day or week doing fun, exciting, and enjoyable activities. Now, we also talked about the beautiful world, a category that basically suggested how nice it would be to live in a beautiful world free of war, strife, disease, or ecological disaster. And we also mentioned there, of course, we don't live in such a beautiful world, but we did find out that happy individuals are more concerned with such issues, and the most important thing is they volunteer more of their time to actually make a contribution to community action, volunteer work, charity work, that kind of thing. Finally, the mental health category was the last area we examined, and we found out that happy individuals are virtually the paragons of mental health. They seem to enjoy a high degree of self-actualization, mental health, healthy personality, however you want to term it, and they seem to have many of those wonderful characteristics that go along with it. Well, when we examined what we went over last week in the big board in the sky, we had to admit that happy individuals do indeed have it made. They certainly max out in most all of the categories that, I think most all of us would want in the good life. Now, no one of those characteristics has incredibly overwhelming statistics associated with it. They're all of a relatively low magnitude, but over thousands and thousands of people, these statistical trends do seem to have some bearing on the nature of personal happiness, as we said. The more of those ingredients that we discussed last week, the happier a person tends to be, statistically speaking. Now, the question is, or the one thing I wanted you to make sure you had written down, and if you don't, you might do that now, is the fact that the correlates that we talked about last week are the objective and situational ingredients in happiness. In other words, these are the things that are easily measurable, the demographic characteristic, age, sex. And by the way, based on some of that data, one of the things we did not examine that might be important to you is what would you predict after looking over the big board in the sky would be the happiest age of a person's life. There's broad statistical averages. When would you say that most average people have those kinds of ingredients working for them? The family life is going well, the career is off the ground. Late 30s, the 40s, early 50s, usually the happiest periods of life for most people. All right? Unfortunately, after that period of time, especially after age 65, the happiness rate dramatically decreased. And in a sense, you can sort of get an index of how happiness ebbs and flows over the course of a person's life by looking at that big board in the sky, because that kind of represents, when those things are in greater abundance, when they're not. Nonetheless, I'm sure you left last week with a little bit of a kind of depressive feeling. And that's why we refer to the big board as the bad news of happiness research, because it's pretty clear that those are an awful lot of fine things that would contribute to, obviously, everyone's happiness, yours too. But unfortunately, the bad news of happiness research is that not everyone is going to have those fine things. I guess to make it on a more personal level, the bad news of happiness research is that we know a lot of things that could greatly contribute to your happiness that you may never get. Kind of a sad fact of life. Not everybody ends up being a millionaire, do they? Not everyone ends up with that rewarding love relationship that seems to be as new as spring for year after year after year. We envy those few couples we see around us who are like that. Not everyone has kids that grow up trouble-free, winning all the awards, having that kind of a model social existence, being the prom queen, that kind of a thing. No. Not all of us enjoy great success. There are many of us who will be relegated, unfortunately, usually through no fault of our own, to those more menial jobs in life, to the jobs that don't command a great deal of attention, respect, fame, glory, so on and so forth. The sad news of happiness research apparently is that there are an awful lot of things that contribute to a person's happiness that many people will never get, and that many of you may never get, and that some of you may have already had and lost. Well, that being the case, it's a little bit kind of, downright depressing, I would say. Apparently, if that is all there was to the nature of personal happiness, then indeed it would be kind of sad news indeed for the majority of Americans. Now, of course, we psychologists are obviously in the business of, researching a psychological phenomena just for their own sake. I mean, it's pretty obvious that, the findings we discussed last time are interesting academically just in their own right. It's kind of fascinating. It's nice to know what these ingredients would be. It's nice to know what contributes to the happiness of the vast majority of people here in our culture. And by the way, those findings seem universally applicable in many of the studies that have been done in happiness research. Massive public opinion sampling polls have been done in Western Europe and all the modernized nations. One massive effort by Cantrell examined happiness levels in over 50 countries, both developed and undeveloped, and finding that the ingredients of happiness remain fairly universal, which leads us to believe, psychologically speaking, this construct of happiness tends to be maybe one of the more deep-seated, one of the more basic core concepts of human existence. And I think it's becoming recognized more and more that way these days. Nonetheless, if that's all that contributed to personal happiness, I guess it would be rather sad, depressing news indeed, because most of us could well assume that our happiness was pretty much fixed. That unless some really miraculous changes happen, unless we finally really make it to the top, become one of those instant millionaires or something like that, end up, just having things just radically transformed, we're kind of stuck. And I don't know quite what to say about that. Fortunately, I guess what I had to say about it is that's not necessarily the case, because even though we left you with the bad, depressing news of happiness research, there is good news as far as the happiness research goes, and that is what my mission is to share with you this evening. Now, to give you a little bit of a historical background on how we discovered this good news of happiness research, let me take you back, to a continuation of our story, the second greatest story ever told, the story, of course, of happiness research. And basically, I, along with my colleagues, continued to get a little frustrated as we looked at this continually inpouring data regarding the nature of personal happiness, the idea that happy people seem to have it made in all these important social categories. And yet, as psychologists, we are concerned with coming up with programs or, therapy regimes or various techniques to help people actually, elevate the human condition. The pure research, for its own sake, of course, is valuable, and I think to academicians it's kind of interesting. It's nice to sort of sit around and be aware of the kinds of things we went over the last time. But as far as being very much help to the average individual, there certainly didn't seem to be much help in that data. Of course, we could suggest, I guess, we were on some sort of a talk show or something, and the host said, well, Doc, would you recommend to our audience? And based on the big board in the sky, there really wouldn't be much more than say, well, I guess you can advise your audience to, miraculously improve their health. Yeah, that's it. That's the ticket. That'll help them be happier. Or, hey, maybe double or triple their income in the next few months. Sure, hey, that'll help them be happier. Or go out and find Mr. or Ms. Right. Just ditch their present family situation and just go out and find that perfect marriage, model family, rent a kid, and have a perfect time, right? Well, as true as that advice might be, it's really not very much practical help to the average individual. So, we began an attempt to see if there was something, however, that average individuals might be able to do that might help them increase their personal happiness. And that, indeed, has been the bulk of the research that I have been conducting over the last decade. It began with another survey of the happiness research, but this time what we were looking for, I guess, could be phrased as good news items. Things about happy individuals that we felt might be employed in a research kind of experimental program to help average people greatly increase their happiness. Indeed, in a sense, actually manipulating people to the point that they ended up being much, much happier. Well, for many years at the very basement of the 7-story, top-secret underground research complex underlying the fabulous FORDYCE mansion, we worked on this very project, trying to identify things about the nature of happy individuals that we felt average individuals like yourselves could be able to employ to actually help increase their own happiness with life. So we were looking for things that we felt average individuals would kind of learn to do. That was sort of the idea. Was there anything about happy individuals that average individuals could learn to do? Were there things about, the way they scheduled their time? Were there things about their personality, perhaps? Was there anything about the way they lived their day-to-day lifestyle? Was there something perhaps about their belief system, their attitudes and values? We touched on that the other day. Things that possibly ordinary people could learn from. In other words, learn from the happiest people that might indeed make them happy themselves. Well, we had two rather thorny problems on our hands. The first was, could we find some things that average people could employ, that average people could learn to do? Or were we talking about, doubling your income, things that no matter how hard people tried, they just wouldn't be able to achieve them? And the second thing, and the more important question we were asking ourselves was, if ordinary people could develop some of these happiness traits that we had begun to isolate, would they indeed become happier people themselves? Wow. It's a fascinating research question. And we have worked on it for many years. And it seems that the answer to both those questions is a resounding and very positive and very happy for everyone yes. That indeed most people can learn to develop these characteristics that I'm about to present to you this evening. And if they do, there is a strong indication that they become much happier people in the process. Now, on one hand, this may sound revolutionary, that we have actually developed a program to make people happier, a program that indeed helps people achieve the most important thing in life, the one thing that they want more than anything in a relatively short period of time? Well, the answer basically is yes. We seem to have succeeded at this. However, perhaps it's not as extraordinary or revolutionary as it might sound. The basic premise of the program The basic premise of the program is a relatively simple one. If average people can learn to be like happy people naturally are, then they themselves tend to become much happier. A very simple proposition. The reason perhaps it had not been tried before was because, as I suggested to you a decade or two ago, we knew very little about the scientific understanding of happiness. But as the research has poured in over the last decade or two, the picture we drew for you on the big board in the sky the other evening has become so well established, as have these other characteristics that I'm about to list, that we've all of a sudden discovered a great deal about the nature of personal happiness that we can share with almost anyone, anywhere. Well, without any further ado then, let me suggest to you a little bit about what this happiness program entails. Now, we refer to the program as the 14 Fundamentals. Now, that's a short little title for the 14 Fundamentals program to increase personal happiness. You don't need to remember all of that. Soon you will come to know these things as simply the 14 Fundamentals or the Fundamentals. It's also known as the Psychology of Happiness. That's the materials we have written about it. But these 14 particular items that we have developed this program around are all highly characteristic of happy individuals. These are all highly characteristic of the way they naturally seem to be. And they are also things that we have found that most people, if they put a little effort, a little bit of time, a little bit of practice, can actually begin to develop. So, without any further ado, I would like to present to you the fabulous 14 Fundamentals. Now, as I list these to you, I want you to kind of be aware that many of these things that we will mention, you probably already did. There's a good deal of evidence to suggest that simply, because many of you probably are already somewhat happy, there may be a few of you here that are extremely happy. And if that's true, many, if not all, of these characteristics are already very natural of you. That will probably give you a good kind of feeling inside to realize maybe a little bit more clearly exactly why you have achieved the happiness you have. But particularly this evening, as we begin to discuss these items, if they start ringing bells, particularly for those of you who may not be quite as happy as you'd like to be, for those of you who are, never have really been a truly happy person, then I think what we're about to describe this evening may give you the beginnings of some insights as to how you can become a happier person yourself. Well, remember that we're only going to be covering these items very briefly this evening. We're just kind of introducing them to you. The remainder of our series will be an in-depth analysis of each and every one of these fundamentals, but as I present them this evening, what I would like to do is give you maybe just a little bit of the background, some of the research, just a little bit of a sketch view of this fundamentals program that we will be dealing with from here on out. To begin with, my friends, let me introduce you to fundamental number 1. Now, fundamental number 1 is to be more active and keep busy. Be more active and keep busy. And basically this is based on the findings that happy individuals are remarkably active people, remarkably busy, always doing something, kind of always on the go. Now, they seem to just pack a whole lot more into their average day. Unhappy individuals, by contrast, waste large blocks of time and never really seem to get around to doing much. Their lives are relatively inactive, relatively habitual. When we get to this particular fundamental number 1, we will describe to you not only the sheer volume of activity that happy individuals surround themselves with, but we will also be talking about the essence of this activity. There's a certain quality to it that we describe, or that we kind of call the happy lifestyle. And in addition to that, though, something I think will be even much more helpful to most of you, is we will be listing 5 specific types of activities that the research has shown to be highly happiness-producing. Now, they're very general categories, but once you understand the 5 basic types of activities that are the most happiness-producing, then I think you can begin to have an idea how you might rearrange your life to include more of these types of activities in it. One of the most obvious things that emerged from our data that seemed to us to be the most helpful to average people were how happy individuals live their day-to-day life. And the one thing that we noticed that was most pronounced was the fact that their activity level was incredibly high. Apparently, happy individuals seem to be able to pack a whole lot more into their day. They seem to always be on the go. They seem to always be doing something. Happy individuals seem to be marvelously busy. They really were occupied people who had a lot going on in their lives. The second fundamental, my friends, is to spend more time socializing. Spend more time socializing. And this is based on the strong social theme that we saw on the big board in the sky just the other time. It is based on the fact that social interaction is one of the primary sources of happy individuals, or happiness, and happy individuals spend much more of their time in this kind of social interaction. It would suggest that especially if this is not true of you, now many of you younger people are at a time of your life where your social radius is probably at its widest circle. But others of you may not have that active a social life. You may be somewhat lonely, somewhat isolated, somewhat limited in your social contacts. So when we talk about this fundamental later on, this may be an important one for you. Yes, more than any other quality, happy individuals are marvelously extroverted, super social friendly, extremely outgoing, highly socially oriented individuals that seem to surround themselves with other people and enjoy excellent, good relationships with them. Well, it's pretty clear from Fundamental 2 that you need to spend more time socializing if you're going to become a happier individual, but to do that, there's one obvious inherent problem. Fundamental number 3 talks about the life of meaning. The life of meaning, critically important to personal happiness, and so it suggests be productive at meaningful work. Now, the key words here are productivity and meaning. The idea that meaningful pursuits provide some of the more rich rewards in life, some of the deeper, more fulfilling forms of what we call happiness. And interesting, the life of meaning is something an awful lot of individuals completely ignore. They never really consider meaningful activities as part of their life and thus lose one of the most enriching sources of happiness that the research has revealed. Now, the more lucky among them and the more lucky among you will be the ones who are able to find meaning in their career, in what they do to earn their living. And those individuals who can find something seemingly to their own value system, not everybody else would agree, but to themselves, that's highly significant, really important, really meaningful, as a way to earn one's living, as their lifestyle, so to speak, or their career style, will have going for them one of the richest happiness rewards, that life has to afford. Well, if you're going to keep up with any of these fundamentals, you're going to have to practice fundamental number 4, and fundamental number 4, my friends, is to get D-O. That's right, get D-O, worse than you've ever had it. That stands for better organized, my friends. Get better organized and plan things out. Now, this, too, like all of the fundamentals, is based on research with happy individuals, and we find that they're remarkably well-organized individuals. They really seem to have their acts together. They seem to be efficient, planful. In terms of their social personality, of course, they're quite spontaneous, quite kind of casual. When it comes to their game plan, their day-to-day, week-to-week, and really more their long-term plans, they really have a much more certain idea of where they're going. For those of you who are horrible procrastinators, we will find that's one of the things that gets in the way of happiness a great deal. And we'll help you kind of take care of that procrastination problem, because happy individuals are definitely much less procrastinating. Of course, there are 4 basic steps to getting better organized. Step 1 is to list. Step 2 is to rate. Step 3 is to prioritize. And step 4, reinforce if necessary. Now, let's go over those steps one at a time. Now, fundamental number 5 deals with what we refer to as the arch enemy of personal happiness. The arch enemy of personal happiness, my friends. And the arch enemy of personal happiness is common everyday worry. Most individuals do not seem to be aware of how excessively they tend to worry. Many of you out there, of course, recognize your worry warts, but even the average individual worries a lot more than is good for their happiness. So when we talk about this fundamental later on, we will help you learn how to stop worrying in its tracks, and obviously help you with one of the more potent of the fundamentals according to our past research. Most of us have an eternity of worries already mapped out for us, and they probably consume a great deal more of our mental time than we dare appreciate. At least that's the point of our lesson this evening. Because as we get into the attitude and value fundamentals, we're going to be discussing some very powerful techniques that have a lot to do with your own ability to, in a sense, gain control over your own thought processes. Now, fundamental number 6, I believe that's where we are in, is the controversial fundamental. The controversial fundamental. Now, this is controversial, and I don't want to get into the controversy this evening. But later in the semester, I think we will be able to explain to you, to your satisfaction, why you would be a happier person if you could learn to lower your expectations and aspirations. That's right. Lower your expectations and aspirations. That's kind of a strange thing, you know, when you think about the American dream of high, lofty goals, reaching for the stars, the impossible dream, or whatever. But I think we'll prove to you that in a way, more modest, more realistic expectations and goals set for yourself seem to be a much more appropriate role or road to happiness. If I had written my own fundamentals of happiness based on my own philosophy, what I thought would help people become happier, or what I thought the royal road is, this is one particular fundamental that would have not been included at all. You know, I was very much like I'm sure you all have been trained to be, or have learned to be, or at least aspire to, who believed that the royal road to happiness lay in high achievements, lofty goals and ambition, you know, shooting for the stars, those kinds of things. It seems to be at the very root of the whole American dream, the whole success kind of phenomena, that making it big is the key to happiness, and that success is the only avenue. So we were a little bit shocked when we first uncovered some data that began to indicate to us that happy individuals did not seem to be particularly consumed with ambition, success, high achievement. Well, when we talk about roads to happiness, fundamental number 7 is going to be right up your alley. That is one of the most potent of all of the fundamentals, according to our post-testing with our research subjects in the past. We call it the royal road to personal happiness. That's right, the royal road to personal happiness. And what is the royal road, my friends? Well, the royal road is develop your optimistic, positive thinking patterns. One of the most highly characteristic things about happy individuals is how incredibly optimistic they tend to be, and how most of the time their mind is preoccupied with pleasant thoughts. We also refer to this as the missing link in happiness research, because it tends to explain many of the ironies, many of the kind of inconsistencies in the data we talked about earlier on the big board in the sky. Perhaps maybe you had some questions, like, for example, well, I know some rich millionaire who cries himself to sleep every night, you know. Even though that's statistically rather rare, the missing link, optimism, will explain why that's true. Some individuals seem to be marvelously optimistic, and they seem to be the happy ones in the world. They tend to be able to view most any particular event in the most positive light possible. They're able to kind of bend their perception to see the event in its best possible light, to look for the advantages rather than the disadvantages in any particular situation, to look on the bright side rather than the dark side, to see the cup half full as opposed to half empty, to see the book almost done rather than 3 more chapters to go. You know, there are hundreds of little homilies like this. Count your blessings instead of your sheep, you know. In a real sense, what we're suggesting here is the interpretation of the event has as much to do, perhaps more to do, with how happy or unhappy you will feel and be than the actual quality of the events themselves. Now, the next fundamental is to get PO this time. Not BO, but this time you're going to get PO, which stands for Get Present-Oriented. Present-oriented, my friends. And what does that mean? Well, present-oriented is basically the ability to live fully in the present, in the here and now. One other valuable lesson we've learned from the happiness research is that happy individuals tend to focus much more on today, much more on the moment, much more on this week. That's where their concern is. That's where their efforts are put. They're not unduly preoccupied with past hurts or regret, or unduly worried or, apprehensive about the future. There seems to be this kind of subtle belief that by taking care of each day at a time, the future has a way of sort of taking care of itself. These days are the good old days, apparently, for happy individuals, and most of their attention, most of their efforts, most of their mind, their conscious or their focus, or what we might refer to as their contact with reality, tends to be pretty much within these days, the immediate time frame. Now, certainly they have fond and bad memories from the past, and certainly they have their hopes and aspirations for the future, but the concentration, the mental concentration, is pretty much on the moment. In fact, Maslow noted these self-actualized individuals, healthy individuals, tend to not only focus on the moment, but they're able to appreciate it in such a beautiful, almost artistic sense. They seem to be the type of individuals who never lose that kind of lust for life, the sense of beauty and awe, and almost childlike quality that they possess, but seem to, they seem to still see the magic in everyday little events. Fundamental 10, is that where we're at, my friends? Fundamental number 9. Well, 9, 10, we have to renumber these just about every year anyway. The next fundamental is known as WOAP. WOAP, my friends, W-O-A-H-P. And what does W-O-A-H-P stand for? Well, it stands for Work on a Healthy Personality. Now, Work on a Healthy Personality takes us back to the strong message we mentioned, the mental health happiness connection. And thus we feel it's appropriate in the fundamentals to explain to some extent, give some people or give you all some basic guidelines as to what healthy personality is all about in a nutshell. Now, obviously, we can't do full justice to what healthy personality is all about. Obviously, volumes have been written, and it's a lifelong struggle and journey to develop a self-actualized healthy personality, but it does seem appropriate in our discussions of the healthy personality and of our 14 fundamentals to discuss these principles in brief. What we have provided when we get to WOAP is what we refer to as the WOAP 5. And the WOAP 5 consists of 5 particular qualities that we can kind of use to summarize what happy or healthy personality is all about. It's kind of a mini view of what, mental health is all about in a nutshell. Now, WOAP, and these programs we're going to be dealing with, fundamentally focus on the close connection between your mental health and your personal happiness. We have found in the research a tremendously close relationship between both one's mental health and the happiness they eventually achieve in life. Indeed, the connection is so close, as we discussed in one of our earlier episodes, that happiness is mental health, and, for many ways, mental health is happiness. Now, fundamental number 10 goes back to that strong social theme. It's so important to happiness, and it suggests you would be a lot happier if you could develop an outgoing social personality. Develop an outgoing social personality. Now, develop an outgoing social personality is based on the findings regarding personal happiness that happy individuals seem to be remarkably extroverted, incredibly outgoing, super friendly, just very socially oriented individuals. And because of that, we suggest maybe there might be some lessons for all of us in possibly becoming a little bit more socially outgoing, especially for the type of individual who's, shy, a bit kind of inward, a bit introverted, who would really like to kind of get out of their, kind of box and out into that social world a little bit more comfortably and a little bit more effectively. How does one go about becoming a more socially oriented person? Years ago, a fellow psychologist working right here in the Dr. FORDYCE 7-story underground research laboratory came up with one of the major theories that has helped us along. Because it's pretty clear that for a person to become more outgoing, more socially comfortable, it has to happen in gradual little steps. Well, many years ago, a colleague of ours named Dr. Smile-More began to develop what is known as the Smile-More technique. Now, the Smile-More technique is a very simple way the average person can begin developing an outgoing social personality. And it is so incredibly easy that fundamental number 11 is what most students over the years that I've instructed, at least on the college level, seem to get out of our happiness classes more than anything. And that seems to be that after everything is said and done, how easily, naturally, and effortlessly sometimes everything seems to go your way when you can simply just be yourself. When you can just be yourself. The point is clear. When you be yourself, you tend to attract the people that are right for you and at the same time detract those individuals that the potential is pretty poor that you'll get along with. This leads us to one of the other major propositions behind the A's and the B's. And that is that often it's just as important to be detractive as it is to be attractive. We all want to be attractive, certainly. We all want to be desired by others, but do we want to be universally desired, or do we rather want to be desired by those people we're going to get along with best? fundamental number 12 is the depressing fundamental. The depressing fundamental. Now, the depressing fundamental, of course, is to eliminate the negative. That's what we call it briefly. Eliminate the negative. Eliminate negative feelings and problems. And basically, eliminate the negative will deal with kind of the downside. I think you'll notice that most of the fundamentals are kind of upbeat. Get out there, socialize, be active, keep a happy head, think positively, stuff like that. But it's obvious there are a number of deeper, more pressing personal concerns, problems, difficulties that people tend to face that really kind of get in the way of even beginning the journey to personal happiness. So when we get to that particular fundamental, we certainly have to be able to cure those problems altogether or even come close to it. But I think we'll give some basic mental health guidelines, some basic mental hygiene techniques, and maybe a basic overview of some of the symptoms of emotional deterioration, some of the early warning danger signs of what is going, of what is occurring, that might indeed kind of come back to trip you up. The continuous buildup of a negative emotionality without the ability to express it and ventilate it does have some very deleterious and dangerous effects on both one's physical as well as mental health. What we're suggesting here this evening is that the chronic bottling of emotion will get you one way or the other. If it does not get you emotionally and create emotional difficulties and the beginning, perhaps, of some full-blown emotional difficulties, it will also get you physically. And it does seem to do it one way or the other. You see, the analogy seems to be very much like this. Fundamental number 13 takes us back to that strong social message that's so implicit in the fundamentals, and it takes us back to the number one source of personal happiness that we discussed the other day, the big boy in the sky, and that is, of course, what, my friends? Yes, close love relationships, the number one source of personal happiness. And because that's true, we're going to be spending a good deal of time discussing the nature of close love relationships, giving you a few tips about perhaps how to enhance those, how to recognize the valuable effect it has on your personal happiness, and for those of you who are currently not involved, perhaps even better. By the time we're through this little mini course, I think you'll understand to a much better degree some of the danger signs of what we might refer to as bummer relationships, and believe me, there are a lot of them out there waiting for you. In fact, probably this evening when you leave, there might be a few even in the old parking lot. You'll be able to recognize these bum relationships, 3 bar stools away, as we kid about it. Sometimes that may not happen right off the bat, but I think being forewarned is often being forearmed, or whatever that is, forearmed, well, whatever it is. Nonetheless, you'll have a much better idea of what you're looking for in a much more healthy relationship. Surprisingly, most people in our society have very little knowledge about the ingredients of a healthy relationship. Years of research have been conducted in the area of couple psychology, marital success, marital happiness, and of all the factors that people have come up with, one emerges far more strongly than any other factor that we've ever been able to measure. It is so much more than any of the secondary factors that it has become, or considered to be, the most critical, important factor regarding successful relationships. And yet the interesting thing about it is, most people know little or nothing about this important factor. So why don't you guess along with me for just a second? What would you imagine would be the number one best predictor of close love relationships? The one thing that successful couples have going for them that most average and unhappy couples simply don't. And finally, my friends, the 14th fundamental is known as the secret fundamental, the secret fundamental. And what is the secret fundamental, you ask? Well, we like to refer to it as Valhalla. The secret fundamental, the fundamental that's strong enough for a man, but made for a woman, right? Now, the secret fundamental is going to remain a secret for two rather important reasons. Obviously, you can look it up in your written materials, but I would ask you not to at this point in our class. Kind of keep it a secret to yourself, because it'll be more fun that way. We keep it a secret for two reasons. One, to add a little bit of mystery, intrigue, suspense, adventure to our proceedings, to have something to surprise us with at the end. Just a kind of something that's going to be a secret. But the main reason I've kept it a secret over the years is because when we talk about this later on, after all of our other discussions, you will more than likely discover that this particular thing has already happened to you, and you put forth no effort whatsoever to make it happen. In other words, just as a mere byproduct of learning about these other 14 characteristics of happiness, you will have automatically or indirectly begun to develop one of them without even being aware of it. Isn't that great? Learning something and you didn't even have to try. Well, I tell you, you guys have it made. Well, that's what we have to offer you in the coming classes. Learning about the fabulous 14 fundamentals. Let me say just a few minor things more before we part this evening. That is, inherently, the 14 fundamentals are designed to be a rather rigorous program of self-study. Now, in our experiments, we really put people through the mill. They were expected to devote at least a few hours a day to their happiness-increasing programs and strategies. And when we talk about these fundamentals later on, we will discover that each one, has a lot more to it than meets the eye. When we discuss these fundamentals, and we'll deal with a couple of them each class, we will discuss not only what the principles are and what they really mean, but also a lot of the theoretical and psychological concepts that lie behind them. In other words, what is the theory? Why do these qualities contribute to the happiness of the happiest people? And why do we hypothesize they work so well for ordinary people who are able to develop them? Once you get the theory behind it, they will become much more understandable and acceptable to you, I believe. In addition to that, with each of these fundamentals is a good deal of technical advice in terms of how you can practically make these things work out. Procedures, techniques, kind of hints, self-help strategies, kind of games you can play with yourself, exercises you can do throughout the course of the day that will help you develop these characteristics, be more to the point that they actually become a part of you. So in that sense, it's really something to work with. It could take up a great deal of your time, and obviously our research seems to indicate that the more time you spend on any of these particular items, generally, the greater your happiness boost will tend to be. Obviously, our findings seem to indicate the people who gain the greatest levels of happiness working with this particular program are the ones that, rude chair, are the people that basically work with them the most. However, we will also have some evidence to indicate that individuals who are simply exposed to this information, who really don't practice it much at all, but just think about it some, also show more moderate increases in their happiness level too. I will tend to think that as you become more familiar with these, you will start developing your own happiness improvement strategy, and you've got the research going for you, because our evidence does seem to indicate that these fundamentals do indeed have the potential of greatly increasing your own personal happiness. Now, on one hand, that may sound like a rather wide-eyed or wild-eyed claim. It may sound like some sort of a minor miracle. And I'd like to think that both those things are true. But in actual fact, perhaps there's a little bit more of an exaggeration. The 14 fundamentals work simply because research science works. These are not my ideas. This is nothing I just drummed up out of my head. It's not philosophy. It's not theory. These are actual facts. These are facts that we've established that are highly characteristic of happy individuals, and so really all that's happening is you're learning from them. They indirectly are sharing with you, apparently, some of the secrets to their happiness, and now, apparently, it's no longer a secret. It's available for anybody who wishes to take advantage of it. It's simply an experiment for you to work with, try out. But, in other words, you do have the evidence, the research working for you. Because in theory, it's a very simple proposition. If you can be like happy people are, you can be happier too. And so it's really no miracle, and it's no real, dramatic kind of a thing. It's simply just taking advantage of what we scientifically have discovered about the nature of happiness and using it to your own personal benefit. Now, like I say, because the myths that have always surrounded the nature of happiness, that always seems to have a little funny sort of a ring to it. And I think that's largely because people don't really see that happiness is no different than any other area of knowledge. Now, if we were talking about engineering here, and you all were students of engineering, and you all were expected to go out tomorrow morning and build a bridge, I have no doubt that you would want to be collecting as much information about it, and the more you had, the better bridge you'd build. And I don't think anybody would question that at all. Well, happiness apparently is no different. The more information you happen to have about it, the better able you are to control it. So, in that sense, happiness becomes a little bit demystified and becomes a little bit more of a tangible, realistic goal that most anybody can profit from and work toward. So basically, my friends, we've come a long way in a few sessions. We began with just a simple discussion of what the most important thing is in life, and we began to sort of center on the idea that it is this emotional feeling of happiness that really, after all is said and done, is what makes life worth living and what we're really seeking. And then we went from that to an exploration of the big board in the sky, kind of the bad, depressing news of what happy people have that not everybody gets. The good things in life, and of course my wish is that those things will come your way, but good news or not, or bad news or not, there is good news to the happiness picture. And of course, the good news is, apparently, the 14 Fundamentals program that we have been in the process of developing and continue, to develop and enhance as the years have gone by. What is the good news? Well, like I say, the 14 Fundamentals, but it goes beyond that. There is enough about the nature of happiness contained in these 14 Fundamentals that an average person can greatly improve, and greatly maximize the happiness they get from living. Indeed, we have studied many individuals who apparently are able to achieve levels of happiness that rival these mythical happy people that we talked about earlier. And the interesting thing about it is, it's something that will not require that long a period of time. Indeed, these 14 Fundamentals, if actively pursued, and remember, this is a program of rigorous study. You all will simply be learning the basics, but unless you actually apply these things, practice some of the techniques that we will be learning about in the coming weeks, actually, spend or schedule periods of time during the day to kind of train yourself, the program certainly won't be as effective. But there is potential that you can indeed become a much happier person in a relatively short period of time, so I think that's rather good news. So, we will continue with our journey down 14 Fundamental Lane, I guess beginning the next time we get together. So I certainly thank you all for your attendance here tonight. I certainly hope you've enjoyed it half as much as I have, and we will see you next time. Well, that about wraps up this episode of the Psychology of Happiness series, the good news and the bad news. Of course, now you know that there is a tremendous possibility of you learning about and hopefully increasing your personal happiness following the 14 Fundamentals program. Well, we've come a long way in the last few programs, discovered what the most important thing in life is, personal happiness. We've learned that happiness is nothing more or less than an emotion. We've learned about the things that happy people have that you may or may not have. We've learned about a variety of things, the good news and the bad news, but this evening we have also learned about the fabulous 14 Fundamentals program that you can employ to help increase your own happiness. And these 14 Fundamentals, the entire happiness program that we have researched here, is going to be the focus of our remaining programs in this series. Beginning the very next time we get together, as a matter of fact, as we begin to examine a little bit more about these 14 Fundamentals and especially about your own relationship to them. In other words, what we have planned for our next program will be a program you can participate in. We're going to be learning a little bit more about your own happiness as we take a test of your happiness traits. I think you'll find it quite fascinating. You'll be able to take this quiz right in the comfort of your viewing area, and we'll be providing that to you. So, we'll see you the next time when we find out a little bit more about your happiness in a program we call A Test of Your Happiness. Well, let's find out if there's anything on one of these other channels here.
And welcome back to Outlook. We're talking about happiness with the Dean of Happiness Research, Dr. Michael FORDYCE from Edison Community College. Dr. FORDYCE, your research, or psychologists, when they talk about happiness, is about what people can do to achieve happiness rather than what can be done to them to make them happy. It's not like taking a magic pill somewhere along the line, even though some biochemist somewhere along the line may find that magic happiness pill. Yes, indeed. I'm sure eventually that may be the ultimate solution. I hope not, however.
we've discovered so many things that the average person can do to help increase their happiness, and we've learned these basic techniques primarily from the happiest people we've studied. Our basic strategy, and the work I'm basically famous for, has been a happiness increasing program that we've developed here at the college. And essentially that program is based on learning what is it that happiest people do and seeing if we can teach ordinary people to simply do the same things. It's
you can do the same things, you almost mimic whatever they do or try to achieve
in a broad sense, yes. The idea is if you can be more like happy people are, you'll be happy too.
Well,
most people just don't know what happy people are like.
Well, we're going to look at, I guess, 14 fundamentals of happiness, or in the psychology of happiness, and we're going to take them one by one. The first one being, be more active and keep busy.